Most actors spend their whole careers trying to create one unforgettable character. Keanu Reeves somehow gave the world many. From a silent hacker trapped inside a digital prison to a broken assassin fighting through neon streets, his movies never feel fake or forced. There's always something human hidden behind the action, the pain, the calm voice, or the quiet look in his eyes. And that's exactly why people connect with him differently. Not because he acts like the loudest star in Hollywood, but because he feels real even inside unreal stories. Critics have praised his screen presence for decades, while directors like Chad Stahelski and the Wachowskis openly talked about his dedication, discipline, and humility during productions in interviews with Empire Collider and Entertainment Weekly. But the truth is, not every Keanu Reeves movie became legendary overnight. Some were doubted, some were misunderstood, and some changed cinema forever years after release. So before time passes and another generation discovers him all over again, these are the Keanu Reeves movies you absolutely must watch before you die. The journey really begins with The Matrix because after 1999, action movies were never the same again. Before this film, audiences had seen sci-fi worlds, martial arts, and slow motion effects separately, but the Wachowskis blended them into something that felt revolutionary. Keanu played Neo with a strange mix of confusion, fear, and quiet determination that made the character believable instead of overly heroic. And what makes the performance special is how restrained it feels. Another actor could have turned Neo into a loud action stereotype, but Keanu understood the loneliness of someone discovering his entire reality was fake. According to interviews from the film's training team, Keanu spent months learning martial arts before shooting began. Even while recovering from neck surgery, that level of commitment became part of the film's identity. Every fight looked sharp because the actors actually trained hard for it. Scenes like the lobby shootout, the rooftop dodge, and Neo finally stopping bullets became permanent parts of movie history. But beyond the action, The Matrix asked questions people still debate today. What is reality, and how much control do we truly have over our lives? That deeper emotional layer is why the movie still works decades later. Then came John Wick, a movie almost nobody expected to become one of the biggest action franchises ever made. The original film sounded simple on paper. A retired assassin seeks revenge after criminals destroy the last emotional connection to his late wife. But Keanu transformed John Wick into something far more emotional than a typical revenge character. There's pain in the way he walks, speaks, and fights. Director Chad Stahelski explained in multiple interviews that Keanu insisted on doing as much stunt work as possible because he wanted the audience to feel the realism of every movement. And you can see it clearly. Reloads, grapples, injuries, exhaustion. Nothing feels fake. The world of John Wick also became unforgettable because of its strange rules, secret hotels, gold coins, and silent respect between killers. Instead of feeling chaotic, it felt organized like a hidden society operating beneath normal life. Keanu's calm performance became the perfect center for all that madness. He never overacts, he barely raises his voice, but somehow every scene carries weight because you understand the grief driving him. By the time the sequels arrived, the franchise had already changed modern action cinema. Long takes, practical choreography, and physical storytelling became popular again because audiences were tired of shaky cameras and messy editing, and Keanu stood at the center of that shift. But long before John Wick or The Matrix, there was Speed, one of the most entertaining action thrillers of the 1990s. This film proved Keanu could carry massive mainstream action before anyone fully realized his potential. The story sounds almost impossible. A city bus will explode if it slows below 50 miles per hour. Yet the movie works because of tension, pacing, and chemistry. Keanu plays Officer Jack Traven with enough confidence to feel heroic, but enough vulnerability to stay human. The film never pauses too long, and neither does he. Every decision feels urgent. Every second matters. Jan de Bont directed the movie with practical stunts that still look impressive today because they were actually happening on screen instead of relying completely on digital effects. Audiences could feel the danger, and Keanu's chemistry with Sandra Bullock became another major reason the film succeeded. They felt natural together instead of forced into fake romance. Even years later, fans still talk about their connection because it came from genuine friendship and comfort between the actors. Speed remains one of those movies people accidentally rewatch whenever they catch it on television because the energy never disappears. Another film that deserves far more respect is Constantine. When it first released, reactions were mixed because many comic fans expected a version closer to the original source material. But over time, the movie developed a huge following, and many viewers now consider it one of the best supernatural thrillers of its era. Keanu played John Constantine as a tired man carrying spiritual exhaustion rather than flashy confidence. Chain-smoking, cynical, and emotionally damaged, he looked like someone who had seen too much darkness for too long. That mood gave the movie its identity. Scenes involving demons, heaven, hell, and exorcisms felt eerie because the world appeared grounded instead of cartoonish. Director Francis Lawrence created visuals that stayed in people's minds for years, especially the terrifying version of hell shown in the film. But what really makes Constantine memorable is Keanu's restraint. Again, he doesn't scream constantly or try to dominate every scene. He lets silence and expression do the work. And by the final act, when sacrifice becomes part of the story, the emotional payoff hits harder than many expected. Over the years, fans pushed strongly for a sequel because the character stayed alive in popular culture long after release. Point Break showed another side of Keanu entirely. Before the philosophical sci-fi and assassin worlds, he stepped into a fast-moving crime thriller mixed with surfing culture and adrenaline addiction. Directed by Catherine Bigelow, the film follows an undercover FBI agent investigating a gang of bank robbers known as the Ex-Presidents. What makes the movie stand out isn't just the robberies or action scenes, it's the strange emotional relationship between Keanu's character Johnny Utah and Patrick Swayze's Bodhi. There's admiration, rivalry, temptation, and almost philosophical conflict between them. Bodhi represents freedom without limits, while Utah still believes rules matter. Keanu plays that inner conflict well because he never pushes the character too hard. Instead, you slowly watch Utah become emotionally pulled into Bodhi's dangerous worldview. The surfing scenes, skydiving sequences, and practical stunts gave the movie a wild energy that audiences loved. And despite releasing decades ago, Point Break still feels alive because of its atmosphere and emotional tension. Then there's The Devil's Advocate, one of the darkest performances of Keanu's career. Starring alongside Al Pacino, Keanu plays a young lawyer drawn into a terrifying world of corruption, manipulation, and moral destruction. The movie slowly transforms from legal drama into psychological horror, and Keanu's performance becomes more uncomfortable as the story progresses. What works so well is how believable the temptation feels. Success, money, status, luxury, everything surrounding his character looks attractive at first. But little by little, the film reveals the emotional cost behind ambition without morality. Al Pacino delivers explosive scenes full of energy, but Keanu balances that chaos by staying grounded and controlled. According to production interviews, the actors spend significant time shaping the tension between their characters because the relationship needed to feel personal rather than symbolic. The final result became one of the most memorable supernatural thrillers of the late 1990s. One of Keanu's most emotional films is The Lake House. Unlike his action roles, this movie relies almost entirely on atmosphere, longing, and emotional timing. Reuniting with Sandra Bullock years after Speed, Keanu plays a man connected to a woman through letters despite living in different timelines. The concept could have become confusing or overly dramatic, but the performances keep it grounded. There's loneliness throughout the film that feels authentic. Both characters seem trapped emotionally and physically by time itself. Keanu's quiet style actually strengthens the movie because the character feels sincere rather than theatrical. Many romantic films become forgettable because they depend on cliches, but The Lake House stands out because it embraces patience and emotional distance. It trusts silence instead of constant dialogue, and for fans who only know Keanu from action movies, this film reveals how effective he can be in softer emotional roles. A Scanner Darkly remains one of the most unique projects in his career, directed by Richard Linklater and based on Philip K. Dick's novel, the film, uses rotoscope animation to create a strange, dreamlike reality. Keanu plays an undercover agent losing his grip on identity due to substance abuse and surveillance paranoia. The visual style alone makes the movie unforgettable, but the emotional confusion underneath gives it real power. Keanu captures exhaustion and psychological collapse in a subtle way that fits perfectly with the film's atmosphere. Instead of loud breakdowns, the character slowly falls apart internally. The movie also explored addiction in a tragic and deeply human way. Linklater himself discussed in interviews how personal the material felt because several people connected to the production had experienced the destructive impact of addiction firsthand. That sincerity gives the film emotional weight beyond its sci-fi surface. My Own Private Idaho may be one of the most critically respected performances Keanu ever gave. Directed by Gus Van Sant, the film follows two young street hustlers searching for identity, connection, and purpose. River Phoenix received massive praise for his heartbreaking performance, but Keanu's work deserves attention too because he brought emotional balance to the story. Instead of trying to overshadow Phoenix, he played his role with restraint and realism. The movie itself feels raw and deeply personal, exploring loneliness and alienation in ways many mainstream films avoided at the time. Critics respected Keanu for taking creative risks instead of only chasing commercial success, and this film became proof that he cared about storytelling beyond fame. Another unforgettable movie is The Replacements, which revealed Keanu's natural likability in comedy and sports drama. Unlike his darker roles, this film lets him play an underdog quarterback leading a team of replacement players during a professional football strike. The movie isn't trying to be deeply philosophical, and that's exactly why it works. It's fun, emotional, and surprisingly sincere. Keanu's performance feels warm and genuine because he understands how to play humble characters audiences naturally support. Teammates who initially feel like outsiders slowly become a family, and the movie captures that emotional transformation perfectly. Over time, The Replacements became one of those comfort films people return to because of its positive energy. Street Kings deserves more attention than it usually gets. This crime thriller placed Keanu inside a morally messy world of police corruption, betrayal, and violence. Instead of playing a clean hero, he portrayed a detective struggling with grief, alcoholism, and loyalty. The performance feels rougher and more damaged than many of his mainstream roles. Director David Ayer pushed the cast toward realism, and Keanu responded by giving one of his grittiest performances. The movie constantly forces viewers to question who deserves trust, and that uncertainty keeps tension high throughout the story. 47 Ronin divided audiences when it released, but visually and emotionally, the movie still offers something worth experiencing. Inspired loosely by the famous Japanese legend, the film blends fantasy elements with samurai storytelling. Keanu approached the role respectfully, and behind the scenes, producers discussed how seriously he treated the cultural aspects of the project. While critics debated the film's structure, many fans appreciated its atmosphere, loyalty themes, and emotional sincerity. The story centers heavily around honor, sacrifice, and belonging, themes Keanu often portrays effectively because of his calm screen presence. Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure showed audiences something completely different from the intense action star people later recognized. Playing Ted with goofy charm and innocence, Keanu created a character full of optimism and ridiculous energy. The movie follows two teenagers traveling through time to complete a history presentation, and its humor works because the characters remain lovable instead of annoying. Years later, the film still carries a strangely positive spirit that audiences connect with. And what makes it even more impressive is how different Ted feels compared to Neo or John Wick. It proved Keanu could shift between genres without losing authenticity. Then there's Something's Gotta Give, where Keanu surprised many viewers by stepping into a mature romantic comedy alongside Jack Nicholson and Diane Keaton. Instead of trying to dominate scenes with charisma, he played his character with kindness and emotional intelligence. Critics often mentioned how refreshing his performance felt because the role relied on sincerity rather than ego. Sometimes actors become trapped by audience expectations, but Keanu repeatedly avoided that trap throughout his career by choosing projects that challenged different sides of his personality. Dracula, directed by Francis Ford Coppola, remains one of the most visually ambitious gothic horror films ever made. Keanu played Jonathan Harker in a world filled with elaborate costumes, practical effects, and haunting imagery. While the film itself became famous for many reasons, its artistic style continues to influence Gothic cinema today. Coppola intentionally used old filmmaking techniques to create a dreamlike atmosphere, avoiding excessive modern visual tricks. Even decades later, the movie feels visually rich and unforgettable. Always Be My Maybe only featured Keanu in a supporting role, but somehow he completely stole every scene he entered. Playing an exaggerated fictional version of himself, he showed a level of self-awareness and comedic timing that audiences did not expect. The performance became instantly memorable online because he was willing to joke about his public image without seeming arrogant or desperate for attention. It reminded people why audiences naturally enjoy watching him even in smaller appearances. Another important film is Destination Wedding, where Keanu reunited with Winona Ryder for a romantic comedy built almost entirely on dialogue. Both characters are cynical, awkward, and emotionally defensive, which gives the movie a very different tone from traditional romances. Instead of perfect Hollywood charm, the film focuses on damaged people trying to connect despite their flaws. Keanu's dry humor and quiet delivery fit perfectly into that world. Throughout all these movies, one thing becomes impossible to ignore: Keanu Reeves never built his career around trying to look perfect. He built it around emotional honesty. Even his action heroes carry sadness, uncertainty, or vulnerability beneath the surface. That's why audiences trust him on screen. Directors, stunt coordinators, and co-stars repeatedly describe him as disciplined, respectful, and deeply committed to the work. Chad Stahelski once explained during interviews that Keanu trains harder than actors half his age because he genuinely cares about giving audiences the best possible experience, and that attitude shows in every frame. Some actors chase trends. Keanu Reeves somehow survives them. From 1990s thrillers to modern action masterpieces, he adapted without losing the qualities that made audiences love him in the first place. Humility, sincerity, emotional calmness, and dedication became part of his identity both on and off screen. And maybe that's the real reason these movies matter so much. They don't just show different characters, they show different parts of human emotion, grief, love, fear, sacrifice, loneliness, hope, and redemption. When people talk about movie stars, they often focus only on fame or box office numbers. But with Keanu, fans talk about connection. They remember how certain scenes made them feel. Neo standing up again after failure, John Wick refusing to surrender despite pain, Jack Traven trying to save strangers on a speeding bus, Constantine sacrificing himself for another soul. Those moments stay alive because Keanu performs them with emotional truth instead of empty spectacle. And in an industry where audiences can instantly sense fake emotions, that honesty becomes rare. Even now, younger generations continue discovering his films for the first time. Some start with John Wick and go backward. Others discover The Matrix through internet culture before realizing how influential it truly was. And once people enter his filmography, they usually stay there because every era of his career offers something different. Sci-fi, romance, thriller, comedy, sports drama, supernatural, horror. Few actors move through genres this naturally while still feeling authentic, and the beautiful thing is that Keanu Reeves never needed controversy, arrogance, or fake celebrity behavior to stay respected. The stories people share about him off-screen, giving time to fans, respecting crews, supporting stunt teams, staying humble despite global fame, only strengthen the emotional connection audiences already feel from his movies. That reputation didn't appear from marketing. It grew slowly through years of consistent behavior witnessed by coworkers and fans alike. So when someone says Keanu Reeves is more than just an action star, they're not exaggerating. His best movies work because they balance spectacle with humanity. Behind every gunfight, emotional speech, romantic scene, or sci-fi mystery, there's always a real emotional core holding everything together. And that's why these films continue surviving long after trends fade away. And maybe the most fascinating part of Keanu Reeves' career is how unpredictable it became over time. Because if you look at his journey carefully, it never followed the normal Hollywood formula where actors stay inside one safe lane forever. He moved from comedy to intense drama, from independent experimental cinema to billion-dollar action franchises. And somehow, the audience kept following him because there was always something emotionally honest underneath every performance. Even in films that divided critics, fans could still feel the sincerity he brought to the screen. That matters more than people realize. Audiences forgive imperfections when they believe the actor truly cares about the story, and Keanu has spent decades proving exactly that. One movie that deserves serious appreciation is Chain Reaction, a science fiction thriller where Keanu played a machinist caught inside a dangerous conspiracy involving clean energy research. The movie carried that classic paranoid 1990s thriller atmosphere where powerful organizations manipulate truth behind closed doors. And while it never reached the legendary status of The Matrix, it still showed Keanu's ability to anchor high-concept stories with grounded emotion. Instead of turning the character into a loud action machine, he played him as a regular man overwhelmed by events far bigger than himself, which made the tension feel believable. Another underrated project is Hardball, one of the most emotional films in his entire career. This movie avoided flashy action completely and focused on a struggling gambler who becomes a little league baseball coach for kids growing up in difficult environments. Keanu approached the role with unusual softness and restraint, and the emotional moments work because the movie never tries too hard to manipulate the audience. The relationships between the coach and the children slowly become genuine, and by the later parts of the story, the emotional impact hits deeply because the film earned those moments honestly. Many fans who only know Keanu from action movies are genuinely surprised when they discover how heartfelt Hardball feels. Then there's The Gift, directed by Sam Raimi, where Keanu stepped into a darker role unlike the calm heroes audiences usually associated with him. Playing an abusive and threatening character could have easily become exaggerated, but he approached it with disturbing realism instead of cartoon villain energy. It showed that he was willing to take creative risks even if audiences might initially feel uncomfortable seeing him outside his usual image. Actors often fear breaking fan expectations, but Keanu repeatedly challenged himself instead of staying trapped in one identity. Sweet November revealed another emotional side entirely. The film tells the story of a career-focused man whose life changes after meeting a free-spirited woman living very differently from him. The movie depends heavily on chemistry and emotional vulnerability, and Keanu delivered both in a very natural way. Some viewers criticized the film when it released, but over time many audiences connected with its themes of love, change, and appreciating life while you still can. Keanu's quiet emotional style worked perfectly because the character's transformation feels gradual rather than forced. Another fascinating film is The Neon Demon, where Keanu only appeared briefly but created intense discomfort through the atmosphere of his scenes. That movie itself explored beauty, obsession, and the dark side of fame in disturbing ways, and his performance fit the unsettling tone perfectly. Even with limited screen time, he understood exactly what the story needed emotionally. One thing people rarely discuss enough is how Keanu became one of the few major stars willing to consistently support stunt performers in practical filmmaking. During interviews for the John Wick series, stunt teams repeatedly described how seriously he treated choreography training. He learned weapon handling, judo, jiu-jitsu, tactical movement, horse riding, and complex driving sequences because he believed audiences deserved realism. That respect towards stunt work helped elevate the entire action genre again. Before John Wick, many action movies relied heavily on rapid cuts and shaky cameras to hide limited physical preparation, but Keanu helped bring clarity back to fight scenes. Audiences could finally see the performers moving properly again, and that changed industry expectations. Younger actors entering action cinema now train differently, partly because the John Wick films proved viewers appreciate authentic choreography. Another movie worth mentioning is Man of Tai Chi, which Keanu directed himself while also playing the villain. This project mattered because it revealed how deeply he respected martial arts cinema and Eastern filmmaking traditions. Instead of creating a generic Hollywood action story, he focused heavily on discipline, philosophy, and physical expression through combat. Critics noticed the passion behind the direction because the fights were designed to tell emotional stories rather than exist only for spectacle. Keanu openly discussed his admiration for martial arts legends in promotional interviews, and that respect shaped the film's entire tone. The Day the Earth Stood Still brought him back into major science fiction territory, playing an alien figure observing humanity during a global crisis. The role required emotional restraint because the character was intentionally detached from human behavior at first, and Keanu's calm screen presence suited that perfectly. While reactions to the remake were mixed, the film still carried interesting themes about humanity's relationship with violence, nature, and survival. Another film fans often rediscover later is Parenthood, an early performance where Keanu played a teenage boyfriend with comedic energy and charm. Looking back now, it's fascinating seeing how naturally likable he already was even before global superstardom arrived. There's an ease in his performances that makes audiences comfortable watching him, and that quality existed from the beginning. The Bad Batch offered another unusual appearance, placing him inside a strange dystopian world filled with outsiders surviving in harsh desert landscapes. Once again, Keanu chose atmosphere and experimentation over predictable mainstream choices. Throughout his career, that willingness to explore strange stories kept his filmography interesting because audiences never fully knew what kind of project he might attempt next. And maybe that unpredictability became part of his legacy. Unlike stars who constantly protect a carefully manufactured image, Keanu often seemed more interested in experience and storytelling than controlling public perception. Another powerful example is To the Bone, where he played a doctor treating patients with eating disorders. The role required compassion and emotional sensitivity rather than dramatic speeches, and he approached it carefully. Films dealing with personal struggles can easily become exploitative if handled badly, but the quieter performances helped keep the emotional focus grounded. The whole truth also deserves mention because it allowed Keanu to return to courtroom drama territory. The story slowly revealed hidden layers beneath a murder case, and his performance worked because he avoided making the character feel artificially heroic. Instead, there's ambiguity and emotional complexity beneath the surface. Keanu has always been stronger when he trusts subtlety instead of exaggeration. Knock Knock became another example of him experimenting with psychological tension and uncomfortable storytelling. Directed by Eli Roth, the film trapped his character inside a nightmare built around temptation, manipulation, and consequences. Audiences reacted strongly because the situation felt intentionally stressful and chaotic, but once again, Keanu committed fully to the material instead of playing safe. Even when movies received mixed reactions, his willingness to take risks kept his career from becoming repetitive. One reason fans remain loyal to Keanu is because they sense he genuinely respects the audience. That respect appears in small details. Stories from film sets repeatedly describe him staying late for training, speaking kindly to crew members, supporting stunt coordinators, and remaining professional regardless of project size. Many celebrities carefully manufacture relatable public images through marketing teams, but Keanu's reputation grew mostly through real interactions people shared over many years. Crew workers, restaurant employees, fans on the street, co-stars, countless stories painted the same picture of someone humble despite unbelievable fame. And because audiences already feel emotional sincerity in his performances, those real-life stories strengthen the connection even more. Another unforgettable chapter of his career came through voice acting in Toy Story 4, where he played Duke Kaboom with hilarious energy and self-aware humor. Even animated characters somehow benefit from his unique delivery style because there is a strange mix of confidence and awkwardness that feels genuinely human. Children loved the character's comedy, while older audiences appreciated the playful parody of action heroes. It proved yet again that Keanu understood how to laugh at himself without damaging his image. Cyberpunk 2077 Inches expanded his cultural presence even further when he appeared as Johnny Silverhand in the massive video game. His involvement instantly became one of the most talked about parts of the project because audiences were excited seeing his personality enter interactive storytelling. During gaming events and interviews, fans reacted with overwhelming enthusiasm simply because of the respect and affection they already had for him. That kind of emotional connection cannot be manufactured overnight. It develops through years of consistency. Another interesting performance arrived in Always Be My Maybe, where Keanu intentionally exaggerated internet perceptions of himself into absurd comedy. The scene became viral because he understood exactly how audiences viewed him and leaned into it playfully instead of defensively. Many stars struggle with self-awareness, but Keanu's willingness to participate in the joke made him even more likable. When discussing his best movies, people also need to remember how influential The Matrix remained beyond entertainment alone. Terms like red pill, simulated reality, artificial intelligence control, and digital identity entered mainstream conversation partly because of that film's cultural impact. Philosophers, tech writers, scientists, and internet communities still debate ideas introduced through Neo's journey. Keanu became the face of one of the most discussed science fiction stories ever created, and the film's influence continues across gaming, anime, filmmaking, fashion, and internet culture. Similarly, John Wick influenced modern action cinema so strongly that entire franchises began copying its style of choreography, world building, and underworld mythology. That level of influence rarely happens twice in one actor's career. Yet Keanu managed it, and what makes it even more impressive is that he achieved these successes decades apart. Most actors struggle to reinvent themselves after one defining role, but Keanu experienced multiple generations of relevance. Audiences who loved him during the Speed era introduced him to younger viewers through The Matrix, and those younger viewers later rediscovered him again through John Wick. Few stars survived changing entertainment eras that successfully. Another reason his movies continue resonating emotionally is because Keanu himself often portrays loneliness in a believable way. Many of his characters feel emotionally isolated even when surrounded by chaos. Neo begins disconnected from reality itself. John Wick lives through grief and isolation. Constantine carries spiritual exhaustion. Characters in films like The Lake House and Destination Wedding struggle with emotional distance. Keanu's quieter acting style naturally supports those themes because he communicates through pauses, expressions, and body language rather than non-stop dialogue. Audiences project their own emotions into those silences, which creates stronger personal connection. There's also something timeless about his screen presence. Trends change constantly in Hollywood. Acting styles become louder or more ironic depending on the era. But Keanu's sincerity keeps working because it avoids chasing temporary trends. Even younger audiences discovering older films often say his performances still feel modern because they don't rely heavily on exaggerated acting habits popular during specific decades. And while some critics early in his career underestimated him, many later reevaluated his work more positively after recognizing how difficult subtle acting actually is. Not every performance needs explosive speeches to become memorable. Sometimes emotional honesty leaves a deeper impact. Another important detail about Keanu's career is how often he supported creative filmmakers willing to experiment visually or emotionally. Working with directors like the Wachowskis, Richard Linklater, Gus Van Sant, Catherine Bigelow, and Francis Ford Coppola meant stepping into projects with strong artistic identities rather than purely commercial formulas. That balance between mainstream entertainment and artistic experimentation helped his filmography age better than many expected. Viewers can move from Bill and Ted to My Own Private Idaho to The Matrix to John Wick, and still feel like they're watching someone genuinely invested in storytelling rather than only celebrity status. Even interviews over the years reveal someone who speaks thoughtfully about creativity, philosophy, grief, and human connection without sounding artificial. Fans appreciate that authenticity because it mirrors the emotional sincerity visible in his films. And maybe that's why discussions about Keanu Reeves always feel different from discussions about ordinary movie stars. People don't only talk about success. They talk about kindness, emotional comfort, inspiration, and respect. During difficult times, audiences often return to his movies because his characters keep fighting without losing humanity completely. That emotional resilience matters. Neo chooses belief despite fear. John Wick continues moving forward through grief. Ted remains optimistic despite chaos. Those qualities stay with people long after the credits end. So when someone asks which Keanu Reeves movies they absolutely must watch before they die, the real answer goes beyond titles alone. It's about experiencing different emotional journeys through an actor who spent decades making audiences feel understood instead of simply entertained. Whether the story involves assassins, hackers, lovers separated by time, lost dreamers searching for identity, or exhausted souls seeking redemption, Keanu Reeves always brings something human into the frame. And in a world where audiences increasingly crave authenticity, that honesty may be the reason his legacy keeps growing stronger with every new generation discovering his work for the very first time. If there's one thing these movies prove, it's that Keanu Reeves never needed fake Hollywood energy to become unforgettable. Every era of his career gave audiences something different, but the heart always stayed real. Whether you love the intensity of John Wick, the mystery of Neo, the emotion of The Lake House, or the chaos of Speed, there's a reason these films still connect with people years later. Now, I want to know your personal favorite Keanu Reeves movie and the one scene you can never forget. Drop it in the comments because real fans always have that one moment that stayed with them forever. And if this video made you remember why Keanu Reeves became one of the most respected stars in cinema, hit like, subscribe, and stay here for more real stories about the legends who changed Hollywood forever.